Hello. Boy, that is a bright red shirt, isn't it? Ooh, hello.
Yeah.
So I think after two long podcasts and a bunch of short videos, I think we finally figured out what we want to do, which is the whole topic of this thing is this idea of no Muda, right? We have a lot of experience with agile and lean manufacturing, and so what is this idea of Muda? Tell me what Muda is.
If you'll remember, when we first met, however many years ago that is now.
Oh, many, yes.
I was
almost 20.
I was transitioning from working in a traditional waterfall software environment to an agile software environment, which is very different, right? Instead of version 3.0, 4.0, et cetera, you start releasing things on a very regular basis. And what that meant for marketing, if you recall this, was there was no calendar to kind of organize the marketing plan around on a yearly basis. And I said, all right, well, what are we doing? Right? How do we plan out launch events? What events do we do throughout the year? So we kind of took a step back and looked at what was the organizing principle. And I started a blog about that, really for my own purpose. I don't think more than a few hundred people ever read that blog. But you helped me set that up because it was relatively early, 20 years ago. And it was called the No Muda Marketing. And the idea was we were embracing some of the principles from lean manufacturing. Lean manufacturing, famously out of the Toyota production system, adapted here in the U.S. as well, has some overlap with Six Sigma and other principles and methodologies as well. But it's a way for manufacturers originally, and now many, many types of businesses, to get better on a continuous basis.
Yeah, it's really kind of expanded from traditional manufacturing into, what we're kind of referring to as no Muda management, uppercase management. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Whether it's project management, product management, or marketing management.
So let's talk about Muda. Let's dig in because it is. I love the word. It's fun to say.
It's a good word.
It is a Japanese word, and it really means waste. Right? It's and within the lean manufacturing world, eliminating waste is a key component of getting better, and that waste can be in a lot of different things. It can be transportation, moving things around needlessly. It can be unutilized or underutilized talent. But the biggest form of it is activity that adds no value. That, to me, is the core of Muda, activity that brings no value. And so when you recognize that people are doing work that adds no value, or you yourself are focused on a task that really is not doing anything to support what you're working on, you have to catch yourself and say, wait, why are we doing this?
Explain to me how hard that is to have that conversation, to tell someone that, hey, what you're doing doesn't
doing a
add
really
value.
good job, but it's not worth doing, right? That is a very challenging conversation to have.
Especially in this modern time that we live in where you got to be kind of sensitive with what you say to people.
Yeah, I mean, I have children that are in that generation, right? They're post-millennial, Gen Z, I guess. And I think that can be taken a little too seriously. I think they're not, my kids in particular, are not as sensitive as the media would have you believe. But yeah, I mean, you do want to be sensitive about it. It's redirecting people towards something that does add value. That's the real secret is, hey, let's talk about why you're doing this. Oh, this is the way we've always done things. Okay. Well, what is the projected outcome? What is the best possible scenario here? Well, I don't really know the answer to that. Well, then let's look at something that has a predicted output that is high value.
Well, I think so. Primarily, let's start with asking the question, is it customer-centric? Is it end-user centric? Because it depends on the project, right? Is it if it's a B2B situation, right? Is it centric? Does it serve that end user? Or are you listening to that person? If it's not in service of that, it's probably waste.
It's really defining value, right? We've talked about this again many times through the years. My core tenet for marketing and management overall is every conversation, every interaction you have with a prospect, potential customer, somebody in the industry, your focus should be adding value to that conversation. And that means helping people do their jobs better, really, or helping people advance their career by learning something they didn't know about before. And that value, adding value, is the opposite of Muda. And so that is a good way to look at it.
Right. That's a good thing to keep track of, right? So, you know, when you approach a new project or like you approach a new client engagement, right? How do you get started with, you know, sort of getting people into one room and going? Where do you start? Going through identifying where those. Let's say it's a for the sake of argument, because I already have it queued up. Let's say it's a small business, right? It's a small family-owned business, and they're struggling with certain things. Where do you start?
It always starts with what the desirable outcome is. You want to grow at 20% year over year, 50% year over year. You want to stop losing money. What is the desirable outcome? And then it's an analysis after you define the outcome. Then it's an analysis of what's preventing you from getting there. Often that's where you start to identify the waste.
And is that usually framed in terms of like, what are your struggles right now? What are your current challenges?
It can be a very casual conversation, but you have to be very savvy in taking notes about it. And especially in a small business, if it's a consumer business, a storefront kind of business, you need to ask them in particular, what's going right and what's going wrong. Talk to me about your day-to-day operations. What happens in your storefront or what happens in your back room?
So let me throw you an example then. So there's a small nursery, a family-owned business, not a nursery for children, but a nursery for plants, right?
Yep.
Which I have a lot of experience in. That's been in operation for over 20 years. Plants, gardening tools, landscaping services, all in a mid-sized town, pretty small town.
In retail, right?
Retail, yep. So they have a loyal client base, but the business has really struggled to grow. You know, we within our own communities, we have several of these that come to mind, right? And they're all family owned, and they're in the area, and there's maybe 2 or 3 of them, right? And they're pretty good size. And sometimes you drive by those and you go like, how do those places stay open, right? But the nursery's current marketing strategy relies on traditional methods, right? Print ads, general promotions on social media, and a weekly newsletter, right? So their current challenges are they have really low engagement on social media, and they really struggle with that because they look at everything that's going on in social media and they go, why not me? What am I doing wrong? They have unfocused email campaigns, and they have a lot of untargeted advertising where they are spending a lot of money on print, and it's not really returning any value.
Well, I would make 2 quick notes there. One is they don't have unfocused email campaigns. I don't think they really have email campaigns, right? They have emails, not campaigns. And the other is the whole thing around social media. Right? Social media is just another way of finding conversations where you can add value. It's not about shouting into the world and out into the vacuum and hoping that people listen. That's not what social media is, and that's what most small business owners think social media is.
Sure. So what would you recommend for, despite their constant posting, what would you suggest for that one item? And how would you approach that of someone that's maybe it's, an older family member who is the marketing director, and then they're like, oh, I'll have my niece do that. Well, how do you approach that situation? Because I actually had that conversation earlier this year with a potential client where I was like, hey, I have all these great ideas. We can do this, we can do that. And the response was, yeah, Jessica does the social media, this gesture, right?
I have seen that exact same thing, that exact gesture and that same conversation, even at sizable businesses, right? $40 million where somebody's 22-year-old recent graduate wants to do something in social media, so they hire that person and point them at their Twitter account or, whatever it is now. And the first mistake they're making is, again, that belief that I should be posting more stuff. What they really need to do first is listen. Where are your customers going? Where are they having conversations already? Is there a gardening group in your town, right? Is there
a club or something?
A club. Are there volunteer associations for National Historic Sites nearby where it's often volunteer gardeners who participate in that? The state agricultural college probably has an extension group where people get certified as gardeners. Finding those interest groups, that's where you're going to find your social mavens, right? Your evangelists for your company.
Yeah, that Maven idea is a good one.
So instead of trying to create a voice from scratch, or starting a conversation where nobody is listening, right?
Yeah.
It's akin to going out to the town square and just standing on a table or a step and shouting, right? Instead, you find out where those conversations are already taking place and go and participate in those conversations.
Well, here's another thing I've heard too. Well, what if we just let's go viral? Let's have that. That's our strategy. I'm going to be viral. What would you say to someone that wants to be viral?
That is, again, a common question. I want to go viral. How do I do it? The truth is nobody really knows how something goes viral. There are certain things you can do that make it easier for a post to get reposted again and again and again. Anything with a super cute baby or a dog or a cat in it has more of a chance.
Something trendy.
But that does not necessarily translate into a business advantage especially for a small town business, right? Going viral in a small town, maybe that means reaching 10,000 people instead of 20 million people, right? So setting that goal correctly is kind of step number 2. After you find out what their business challenges are, step number 2 is saying, okay, let's figure out what your realistic goals are. If it is to grow 20% per year, how many more transactions does that mean? How many more, are you going to get more transactions from your existing customer base, or do you have to expand your customer base by 20 or 30%? And if it's probably that last step, we need more customers. That's where it gets a little simpler and more direct about how to acquire new customers.
So I have another one that's a little bit more, maybe a little bit more concrete, which is a chiropractor, let's say. And the question is, okay, what do you want to, what do you remember being what you determine as success, right? And so success for them was, we get 30 new clients per month.
Ooh,
okay,
that's a lot.
Let's just say that's the number. And I said, okay, well, in order to get 30, we can do that math. We can figure that out, right? We know how to do that.
We do that math with business owners all the time, whether it's the CEO of a $50 million technology company or the owner of a local kind of mom and pop plant store or nursery, right?
Okay.
We have that conversation.
So you do all that math, and then you say, in order to get 30 per month, net new customers, here is the investment that you're going to have to invest, the dollar amount and the time, and here's what you're going to have to do.
Yeah.
And the response that we sometimes get back is, okay, what can you do for $100?
Yeah.
So how do you have that conversation?
So clearly there's a disconnection there, right? If you or I were literally hearing that for $100 a month, it would mean that we're talking to the wrong clients.
That's on us. That's an important point.
Very true. What you need to do in advance is do the research about what a standard marketing investment is for their peer companies. So what does a retail nursery spend on marketing within the Midwestern region, for example?
And you know what? A lot of it is whatever that number is, it's usually the stuff that they're doing on the untargeted or they're just like, well, we spend $1,000 a month on a piece of paper.
An insert in the shopper.
Yeah.
The
what's your
weekly
return
shopper.
on that? I don't know.
Yeah. So if you'll remember, when we first started working together, my predecessor at that company had us doing billboards. Right?
On the highway.
I don't have anything against billboards. I just, for the most part.
Well, no. But we were doing digital billboards in the airport.
That's correct.
And that was very much more costly.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
And no way to measure the return on investment for that. And it was literally like 80% of the marketing budget at that point, right?
Right.
So my first order of business was to get us out of that contract as fast as possible. And there are additional challenges there because our executive team, who flew every week to customer sites, et cetera, would always proudly point, oh, look, there we are. We're up on the billboard here in the airport. I love that. And I point that out to all my friends.
You're not the customer.
That was the point we made. If you are seeing it,
we're doing it wrong.
We're spending the money in the wrong place.
We're doing it
because
wrong.
you are not our target audience.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly right.
And that was a conversion they made. When they made that realization, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it.
The case could be made, though, and I think some of them did, which was, well, no, other executives should be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not you.
Yeah, and it was really, again, it's not a matter of we should never do billboards or digital billboards. It was priorities, right? I want to spend the marketing budget that I have on campaigns that I can measure the returns of, and I can make our business much more predictable that way.
Yeah. Well, there's a guy online too that the guy who created NetJet, I think, and his example was, he's not putting up billboards or magazines or doing print ads or doing that. He bought tickets to the Super Bowl, and he went to the owner's suite at the Super Bowl, and he started talking to celebrities about his new jet company. And by the time he left the Super Bowl, which was very expensive to go to the Super Bowl, but then he left with 10 or 12 deals.
And think about this. He knew, he made the realization early on that he had to target high-income individuals, obviously for their high net worth, high-income individuals. And he had to go to a target-rich environment where a lot of those people would be. Right? Super Bowl is a very smart way of doing it. At the same time, he was targeting celebrities, which becomes kind of a free advertising rotation as well, where people would go, oh, so Angelina Jolie's, Brad Pitt's using that.
We're going on a little bit of a wormhole here, but this is something I've also been thinking about lately too, of doing that in my own life. Of if I'm frustrated operating here, and I'm not getting the result I want, because I'm doing needless, wasteful stuff, and I'm not adding value, and I'm not getting value. I did this recently of elevate the people that you're with. That's an important thing.
Yeah.
Instead of just being, I'm really frustrated because I'm not getting the high-end results that I want. Well, that's because I'm not participating in high-end people.
That's right.
Hello. And then, upgrade your network if you want to participate in this new sort of world.
And that applies to everything we're talking about.
It does. And so let's kind of land that plane a little bit back to where we were talking about of eliminate, the core. Let's talk about core principles again for No to Muda, which is it's eliminate waste and focus on adding value. So let's talk about what types of waste. Let's kind of deep dive a little bit of like what types of waste, right? We talk about movement. I really feel in today's culture, I think that email and meetings, those two things are sort of the bane of everyone's existence. And it's just so easy. Like you hear about a lot of successful people who are like, they don't have an email address or they don't, they don't have meetings, right? I just watched a video. Schmitty was in a video with his business partner, AJ. It's spend a morning with Mike. And him and AJ go to the coffee shop Fridays. Fridays for them, no meetings.
Nice.
They meet, they have coffee, they go back to the studio, and they work on the business. They don't schedule meetings, they don't have calls, they don't check their emails. This idea of like, if I could rid the world of emails, because it's a way for people to steal your time. It's a way for people to take from you.
It is a waste. That is waste. That is the definition of waste right there. And it's also, everybody's in bad habits around emails. I CC 12 people on a message just to cover my ass. That's the only reason, right? Nobody's really reading these emails. But if a problem comes up later, I can say, oh, no, I sent this to you, 3 weeks ago, right?
So
it's your fault because you didn't read it.
We found today's title, Emails Are Waste.
I would actually take this one step further. I think business meetings are a much bigger stealer of time than emails are.
Yeah.
I am in the habit, and this can sound a little obnoxious, but if I walk into a meeting and people have not done the pre-reading work, if they haven't already checked the presentation or gone through the materials that I sent, I'm done. Yeah, I will reschedule the meeting because if you cannot take the time to prep for it, you're wasting my time now. I prepped for the meeting, and I'm not going to spend an hour reading all these notes to you that I wrote so you could be prepared and we could have a high-value discussion.
So I think things like Notion, not a sponsor, Jira, Confluence, these modern tools, Slack, you can go either way with that because that kind of just replaces emails with a bunch of messages. Yeah. But having something like that, that's a living, more of a living document, and then getting back to being in person at the office, which I think is hugely important, will eventually eliminate. Eventually, I think we'll be sitting here going like, remember when we would send messages?
I don't know. I do think we're at a profoundly different point in the business world than we were pre-COVID, right? Mm-hmm. I think some people will go back to the office on a very regular basis. Some people do it on a sporadic basis, and some people will never do it. Yeah. And it's a very different world. I mean, I'm shocked that we haven't seen more of a crash in the business real estate market, the commercial real estate market, office space in particular, because of that. I mean, even this space we're in today, this is something that would have been unheard of 10 years ago.
Completely unheard of. And I think it's a testament to their success for Office Evolution. Again, not a sponsor, but these things are popping up all over the place. And it's very different than the first attempt that I did with ShareSpace, with having a co-working space, because that idea was more of an open, collaborative. That's not what people want. People want to be able to go to a place and sit and focus, which is why I booked this room today and then the office down the hall, because I need to sit and focus without my dogs running around and things going on.
Yeah, as much as I love my home office, it's not the same as going someplace where I can close a door, not take calls. My kids are not running in. My wife's not running in, asking me a question. I'm not wandering around looking for chores to do.
Or eat all the food in the house, because 100% that's going to happen.
I was in a meeting a few years ago during in the middle of the pandemic, where somebody said, "Boy, I love working from home. My house has never been cleaner."
Yeah,
and I thought, and she caught herself and she said, "Ooh," because I said, because you're not commuting back and forth. That hour each way is now time you have to work at your house. He said, yeah.
Right. Yeah. My biggest thing, and I fully admit, because the statute of limitations is over, but I fully admit during COVID, you could find me on a nice sunny day. I will be outside on my tractor in my yard doing tractoring. 100%.
Yeah, and this is why we have to go back to the office in some cases.
Yeah, right? I will do my tractoring on Saturdays. So let's talk about a little bit more wasteful things. We talked about movement. We talked about,
we talked about dollars,
budgets,
right? Going in the wrong direction.
Activities. Tell me about a wasteful mindset. Let's talk about wasteful mindsets. Overly worrying, kind of repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Yeah.
This sort of, let's talk about wasteful mentality or wasteful mindsets.
Yeah, I think the first one you mentioned, it really hits home for me, worrying without any actions, right? We all worry. Some people much more than others. But worrying is really the true thief of joy, right?
Because it's paying a mortgage of a house that you don't own.
And may never own, right? You're worrying about things that may or may not ever happen.
Yeah.
And so if it's something you can change and make sure the bad thing doesn't happen, then go make that change and do whatever you can to make sure it doesn't happen. But there are some things you need to let go. And that, as a parent of 2 teenage drivers, I will tell you, letting go and allowing them to go fly on their own when they finally have their license is incredibly painful for me.
Well, but you need to trust your team members to do the same thing. You need to trust that, there's all kinds of different ways to delegate to mitigate that worry. But at the end of the day, you need to trust that.
We've had this conversation about trust many times before. Stephen M.R. Covey has this great book called The Speed of Trust. And it's all about this. It's if you trust people to do their jobs well, it removes a lot of the Muda in the workplace. If I know the finance team can be depended on, those results are fully up to date. They nail it down within a day or two at the close of every month. That relieves me as another manager from worrying about, what's the budget going to be next month?
Mm-hmm.
Do I have to carry over expenses? Do I have to plan a little bit differently for the next few months? All that stuff makes a big difference. So trusting them is the same as earning trust as a marketing or sales manager, where you can say, hey, I am delivering month in and month out. Here's how I know. I see these metrics well in advance of the final outcome.
Yeah.
And that means
Remember
I can say
when you
6
first
months
started,
out.
when we did my first performance review,
Yeah.
I gave it to you. I wrote it and gave it to you. And you're like, oh, thanks. That saved me time.
Yeah.
And you're just like, check. Yep. Try this. Maybe adjust this one here a little bit. Okay. Thank you.
If you remember, the whole reason behind that is because I want people to be self-aware of their own performance. And if somebody comes in and gives you a performance evaluation at the end of a 6-month period or a year, and it's a surprise, that's not a good thing.
That's
right?
not
It
a
should
good
never
thing
be a surprise.
for either party.
That's correct. Yeah. So making sure that we're in alignment on a daily basis, weekly basis, as two team members working closely together. Yeah, one's got a management title and one's working for that person. Mm-hmm. But that's not the way I've ever looked at it. It's as a team leader, my job is to set the direction, but also to give you the tools you need as a team member to succeed. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not doing that on a daily basis, then shame on me. Now, if I am doing that and you're not succeeding, that's a different conversation we need to have. Mm-hmm. But when you did that for me, you already knew what your review should be. I already knew what that review should be. It was some documentation we needed to do for a raise, right? That's really what it came down to.
But we had to demonstrate, again, the valuable things. Here's how we added value. So now I think that the next natural transition of this, sort of to bring this full circle, is, okay, we talked about core principles. We talked about some examples. We talked about different types of waste. Now that you all understand that, how do you then cultivate that if you zoom out to a larger organization, right? It's all great for you and I talking about it, perfect. But how do you zoom out and apply that mentality to a larger organization? How do you encourage someone who's maybe they're just out of college, you're teaching them this stuff, they're excited to work there, but then they have the old timer who, is always the Eeyore of the organization. Well, that's not going to work. Well, the problem with that is, how do you cultivate that sort of that mindset and encourage people especially within larger organizations, right? How do you encourage them to have that subtle art of not giving up?
There are two ways to think about this in my experience. One is you have to look at the executive team to begin with, because top down makes a huge difference. If the leadership team embraces this and builds a culture around that, man, that's gold for everybody. Mm-hmm. However, if you come into a company,
in most organizations, it's not, right? There's always a couple of curmudgeons.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I know a young person, college internship, working for a large tech company, and went to their first stand-up meeting as a developer. Mm-hmm. Supposed to be 10 or 15 minutes long, in and out, right?
Yep.
Hour and a half long.
Standing up, yeah.
Hour and a half long.
Yeah, you blew it.
Yeah. And then when that person's manager went on vacation sometime that summer, the second in command took it right back to, a 10 or 15-minute meeting, and everybody was more productive, right? Yeah. So there are roadblocks that people run into.
Yeah, and I think that in all things, I think my encouragement to some of the younger team members would be, just let it breathe for a little. If I could go back and give myself that advice, especially when you and I were working together, it would be, because you always sort of had an attitude of like, that was for me somewhat frustrating at the time, which was like your attitude was just like, we shall see. It was very zen most of the time. Yeah. And for me, being a younger person at that time, it was a little frustrating because I'd be so, excited. You gotta kind of encourage people to be like, hey, just let it breathe. Just give it some air. Something will work out.
Yeah, and it's all about demonstrating success, right? Mm-hmm. You got to show people that something works and that you know why it works because you did the homework up front and that you put the metrics in place to measure. And now look, I tried these 4 different things. 2 of them didn't work at all. 1 worked pretty good, but this 4th one worked fantastic. And this is why, right?
Yeah.
And when even a young person or somebody newer in their career can demonstrate that, that has a ripple across the organization to say, wow, that is really good. And again, going back to early in our journey together, marketing was not a well-trusted organization within that company.
No, it didn't even exist. Really?
Really didn't.
It didn't.
And in fact, the one person who had come and gone before us kind of blew any trust that was there in the first place.
Yeah,
So
definitely fumbled that.
it took 6 to 12 months to build that trust relationship. And you do that by delivering, by knowing what you're doing, demonstrating the results, and continuing to get better all the time.
So we've all experienced this phenomenon where, usually for me it was at large organizations where, they committed to agile and they had the agile user group and the agile committee and it's scalable agile and we're agile, and it was just waterfall with
new terms
with a
on.
piece of duct tape on it that said agile. But then even in those like how you got to be able to encourage people to be like it's okay, we're gonna get there.
We should mention, by the way, that for those not in the tech world, agile is essentially lean principles applied to software development.
Correct. Yeah. And for me, this all kind of goes into the same, stew of management principles. No Muda being sort of the banner on top of it all of the way to explain lean and agile and Six Sigma and da-da-da-da. I mean, yes, you could absolutely go the engineering approach, the pure engineering approach of Six Sigma and all the alphabet soup that. But I think it also applies to, again, marketing, project management, program management, and all kinds of forms of and even your day-to-day life. I mean, where in your life are you doing this? I mean, people will say well, there's a separation of work and life. I don't, no.
You're not a different person at work than you are at home.
No, you're not.
Right.
If people always make fun of us because my wife and I have a shared calendar and spreadsheets and a Google Drive, and we're getting ready for the Thanksgiving next week, and she sent me a note, a shared note that had checklists and all this stuff, and we review it, and people look at that and go you do that for your life? I'm like, yeah. But look at how organized things are.
So
But look at how it sounds stupid, but look at how successful I am.
This
Thanksgiving was great.
This trip I just went on, this fantastic trip. I had 7 days. After a wedding in Arizona, I covered 1,800 miles, 8 national parks and forests and monuments, more than that in total. Unbelievable, right? And somebody in my family asked me if I was keeping a journal of it, and I said, no, but I have a fantastic spreadsheet that tracks every mile, every dollar, and where I'm going all the time and how much time I have to spend there. And it was a fabulous trip because I had created that spreadsheet and done all the homework up front.
We have this phrase in our family. It's on the list. It's on the list, or it's in the spreadsheet. Check the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And within our little, small family, that just becomes the sort of mantra. And that's a lot of what this is hey, trust the system. It's on the list. If it's not on the list, we're not doing it.
We do the same thing with something as silly as a shopping list. We use Google Keep, right? Just a list in Google Keep, and we keep it up to date, and it refreshes, and it's shared among all of us. So whoever's at the store, we used to get calls all the time. Do you need anything at the store? The pushback is always, did you check the list?
Check the list.
And if they haven't checked the list, check it. And if there's anything on it, get it. If there's not anything on it, then no, we don't need anything.
Yeah. It's not crazy because it does work. It opens up and creates room for your, relationship, for your work to breathe and live because it's all taken care of.
Because the amount of time that you spend doing useless stuff, sometimes necessary like shopping, but useless in trying to coordinate what to buy, that's Muda.
That's Muda. That's waste. All right, good. I think that's, unless you have anything else to add.
This is a great session.
Good conversation. I think we're in the right direction. Ideally, not to talk too much inside baseball here, but I think for us, I think we finally hit like, oh, okay, it's no Muda. And what does that mean of like what value can we add to listeners, to people that want to sign up for this, people want to attend a workshop? I think ideally, we're still in sort of early stages here, but I think that it's really creating this mindset of like, if you want to participate in this, it's kind of back to my TEDx Detroit talk of like this idea of living awesome. Okay, well then now what? How do we take this and make it into core principles that we can actually live off of?
Yeah, I think I've told you this before. There's an old Zen joke about how you write the perfect book or how you write the perfect song. Mm-hmm. And the answer is you make yourself perfect and then write naturally. Right? And so we're not about trying to be perfect here, but what we are trying to do is get people moving in the right direction with the right help and support that they need to do that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Stay tuned for our next one, and
Awesome.
We're looking forward to this.
Thanks, Doug.